In the silent darkness of space, a lonely outpost drifted above a dying star. The station was old, built long before most of its crew were born. Its sensors stretched into the void, scanning for signals, watching the endless silence. For months, they had heard nothing but background noise of the universe. Then, on this night, everything changed. A sound broke the silence. It was faint at first, a broken cry, distorted by distance and time. The communication officer leaned forward, his hands trembling as he replayed the recording. The words were filled with fear and pain. "We are dying. Help us, anyone." The room fell silent. No one spoke, no one moved. They all knew what this meant. Someone out there was desperate. Someone was calling for rescue. The message repeated again, broken and full of static. The officer looked at the commander, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Sir, it's real. This is not background noise. This is a distress call." The commander's face hardened. He ordered the message played across the entire outpost. The alien crew gathered, listening in silence as the broken voice cried for help again and again. For a moment, no one breathed. A whisper spread through them, quiet but heavy. It was not just any message. It was coming from a sector long avoided, a place marked on the charts as hostile, forbidden, uncharted. A sector where ships disappeared and never returned. The commander sent the coordinates to the Central Council. The council chambers, far away on the homeworld, soon filled with voices. Representatives of many species gathered, their faces pale with fear. They listened to the message in silence. The words echoed in their minds. "We are dying, help us, anyone." The first to speak was an elder of the Vayari race, her voice trembling with age. "We cannot go there. That sector is cursed. Many fleets entered, none returned." Others nodded, their voices rising. "It could be a trap. Raiders could be luring us. Or worse, it could be them." The chamber fell silent at those last words. Them. The name was never spoken openly, but everyone understood. The Deathwelders. Whispers spread quickly, like cold wind through dry leaves. Deathwelders were said to be gone for centuries, lost in ancient wars, hidden from the galaxy. Some said they had destroyed themselves. Others claimed they were only a legend, a story to frighten children. But the old records spoke differently. Records told of a species born on a violent world, a world of storms, volcanoes, earthquakes, predators, and endless struggle. A world where survival meant strength, cunning, and war. These beings had adapted to pain. They had turned suffering into power. They were called humans, but the galaxy remembered them by another name, Deathwelders. The council argued through the night. Some demanded the signal be ignored. Others insisted they could not leave the unknown species to die. The younger delegates spoke of hope, of unity, of reaching out. The older ones remembered stories of human fleets tearing through enemies with firepower beyond imagination. If they still exist, one counselor whispered, answering that call could bring them back. Another slammed his hand on the table. And if they return, who will stop them? The chamber shook with fear and anger. No decision was made. Meanwhile, the signal kept playing across the stars. At the outpost, crew members stared out of windows into the black void, whispering their own fears. Some prayed it was a small colony, waiting for rescue. Others whispered darker thoughts. A young officer asked his captain, "Do you believe it's real?" The captain said nothing for a long time. Finally, in a quiet voice, he answered, "Real or not, the signal was not meant for us. It was meant for someone else. Someone who might still be listening." On a distant planet, far beyond council reach, an old listening array activated for the first time in centuries. Dust shook off ancient machines as power surged through them. A faint light blinked, and then the message played again. "We are dying. Help us, anyone." Deep underground, old eyes opened. Hands typed commands into forgotten systems. Somewhere in the shadows of space, a signal was received. Humanity, silent for centuries, had heard the cry. Back in the council chamber, the debate grew more desperate. One delegate suggested sending an unmanned probe. Another suggested blocking the coordinates from all records, hiding the call from the galaxy. Yet another warned, if the Deathwelders hear this, it will already be too late. The chamber fell quiet again, all eyes turning toward the great window that looked into the stars. They all felt the same chill, the same fear. For the first time in centuries, the possibility was real. Humanity might still exist. And if they answered, no one could predict what would come next. Rumors spread across worlds. In markets and taverns, traders whispered of the SOS. On remote stations, soldiers passed the story in hushed tones. Ordinary citizens heard fragments and repeated them like ghost stories. A call for help, they said. A cry from the void. Some dismissed it as false. Others shivered with dread. Children listened wide-eyed as elders told tales of Deathwelders who never ran from battle, who never surrendered, who fought until the stars themselves burned. The council eventually ordered silence. They forbade ships from approaching the sector. They locked records and erased charts. The official story was simple. There was no signal. But in the darkness of the void, the call still echoed. We are dying, help us, anyone. And while the council tried to bury the truth, far away, hidden in the shadows of the galaxy, old war fleets stirred. The humans had been silent for centuries, hidden away, forgotten by most. But they had not been destroyed. They had been waiting, watching, building in secret. They remembered how the galaxy had once treated them. They remembered wars fought and betrayals suffered. When they heard the call, they did not debate. They did not question. They acted. The admiral of the hidden fleet listened to the broken voice. He closed his eyes, remembering the cries of his ancestors long ago. When he opened them, his order was simple. Prepare the fleet. If they need help, we will answer. But if it is a trap, we will remind the galaxy who we are. The engines of ancient warships roared to life. The sound of power echoed in the darkness. Across the hidden shipyards, lights flickered on. Soldiers armed themselves. Railguns were tested. Carriers were prepared. The Deathwelders were awake. Somewhere, in the heart of the void, a storm was rising. And still, the signal kept playing. Over and over, across the stars, a desperate cry repeated. We are dying, help us, anyone. The galaxy trembled, not knowing who would answer. But whispers had already begun. They said the Deathwelders were real. They said humanity had heard the call. And they said the galaxy would never be the same again. The council chamber was filled with unease. Representatives from dozens of alien species sat in silence as the message played again through the hall. The broken voice carried across the room, filled with pain and desperation. We are dying, help us, anyone. The words echoed, bouncing off the tall stone walls, making even the bravest among them shift uncomfortably in their seats. No one wanted to be the first to speak, but silence could not last forever. An elder of the Shalari people finally rose. His skin was pale, his long hands trembling slightly as he leaned on his cane. We all know what sector this came from, he said, his voice slow and heavy. That part of the galaxy is cursed. No ship that enters ever returns. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Many nodded, some even whispered old tales. They spoke of ghost fleets, of strange weapons, of shadows that swallowed whole armadas. Another delegate, a younger one, stood sharply. But what if the call is genuine? What if an entire civilization is dying, waiting for someone to help? Can we simply ignore them? His words carried passion, but his eyes betrayed fear. He too had heard the old legends. Everyone had. The high speaker of the council tapped her staff, and the chamber fell quiet again. She was a tall, sharp-featured being of the Athaka race, known for her strictness. We must consider all possibilities, she said firmly. It could be raiders luring us into a trap. It could be a rival empire pretending to be victims. Or worse, it could be something far older. Something we hoped was gone. The last words made everyone stiffen. No one wanted to say the name, but the thought was the same. Deathwelders. Humans. A delegate from the Vayari race whispered, his voice barely audible. If it is them, then the galaxy is already in danger. For if the Deathwelders still live, they will not stay silent forever. His words seemed to suck the warmth out of the chamber. One of the younger counselors, braver than the rest, slammed his hand on the table. Stories. That's all they are. Legends of a savage people who burned themselves out long ago. There are no Deathwelders. We frighten ourselves with shadows while real lives may be lost. His voice echoed, but the silence that followed was louder still. An elder female of the Ronari turned her many eyes toward him, her tone sharp. You call them shadows because you have not seen what they did. My great ancestor fought in the War of Vale. He saw human ships slice through fleets as if they were paper. He saw planets burn. If they are gone, be thankful. If they are not, then may the stars protect us. The younger one sat down slowly, his defiance shaken. The council argued for hours. Some demanded action, send a rescue fleet, prove they were not cowards. Others insisted on silence. Better to lose strangers than to risk awakening the Deathwelders. Words grew heated, voices rose, and the chamber filled with chaos. Finally, the high speaker struck her staff again. The sound boomed like thunder, silencing all. Enough, she commanded. We will take no action. No fleets will be sent. No signals will be returned. The sector remains forbidden. The message is to be locked away in sealed archives. For the safety of all, no word of this distress call is to spread further. A hush fell over the chamber. Some nodded in agreement, relieved. Others lowered their heads, ashamed. None dared to challenge her directly. The decision was final. But decisions made in chambers are not always followed in silence. Already, whispers were spreading. Council guards carried fragments of the story to their families. Servants overheard and repeated what they had heard. Traders caught rumors and passed them along. And soon, across the stars, the tale was out. On distant colonies, workers in mines spoke of a cry for help from the dark. On spaceports, smugglers told stories of a sector where voices called out and fleets vanished. Some claimed it was a trick of raiders. Others swore it was proof the Deathwelders were real. Fear spread faster than truth, and with each telling, the story grew darker. In the homes of ordinary citizens, parents told their children to stay close, to obey the laws, to fear the black. Do not listen if a voice calls from the stars, they said, for it may be the Deathwelders, waiting to trap you. Children asked questions, but the answers never came. Fear was enough. Meanwhile, back at the outpost where the signal was first heard, the crew could not stop thinking about it. They watched the stars, knowing the call was still echoing across space. The communication officer listened to the broken voice again and again, unable to forget the desperation in the words. We are dying, help us, anyone. It haunted him, even in his sleep. He asked his captain one night, do you think anyone will answer? The captain stared into the blackness of space, silent for a long time. Finally, he said, yes, someone will answer. But I do not think we will like who it is. And deep in the hidden shadows of the galaxy, his words were already becoming truth. The message had reached ears that were never meant to hear it. Old systems had activated, old powers had stirred. While the council wrapped itself in fear and denial, someone else was already preparing to move. The Deathwelders had heard the call far away from the council chambers, beyond the polished halls of power and debate, lay the truth behind the desperate signal. On a lonely world circling a dying sun, an alien colony struggled to survive. Once, it had been a proud settlement. Wide cities stood tall, rivers ran bright, and trade ships crossed its skies. But that was long ago. Now, the colony was broken, scarred by endless raids and hunger. Smoke rose from what had once been a grand capital. Towers were shattered, their sides blackened from fire. Streets were empty except for rubble and the broken shells of vehicles. Families hid in the ruins, their eyes hollow with hunger, their bodies thin from weeks without proper food. They whispered in silence, waiting for another attack. The people of this world had once believed they were safe. The council had promised protection, had sworn that fleets would guard the colony. But no fleets had come. The raiders had struck again and again, each time taking more. First, they stole food. Then they stole fuel. Then they began taking lives. Now, the colony had nothing left to give, except blood. In the old command building, the last governor of the colony sat in the dark. His name was Rahator, a leader who had once dreamed of growth and hope. Now his eyes were tired, his voice heavy with despair. He looked at the small group of officers who remained. Their armor was scratched, their weapons nearly useless. Some carried blades instead of rifles, because their energy cells had long since run dry. One of his officers spoke, her voice shaking. "Governor, our defenses are gone. The shields will not rise again. If the raiders return, we cannot stop them." Rahator closed his eyes. He already knew this. He had known it for days. But hearing it said aloud made it feel final, like a death sentence. Another officer slammed his fist against the table. "The council has abandoned us. We sent messages for months, and they gave us silence. We begged for fleets, and they gave us excuses. We are alone." The room fell into bitter silence. They all knew it was true. No help was coming from the council. No ships would arrive to save them. The galaxy had turned its back on them. Finally, Rahator spoke, his voice low. "We are not alone. Our signal is still out there. Someone must have heard it. Someone must be listening." The officers exchanged glances. They had all heard the recording, the desperate cry that had been sent again and again into the void. "We are dying, help us, anyone." But in their hearts, most of them no longer believed. Who would come for them? Who would risk traveling into this cursed sector for a dying colony with nothing left to offer? Outside, in the ruins, the people whispered the same question. Parents held their children close, telling them to be strong, though their voices shook. Elders stared at the skies, searching for a light, for a ship, for anything. Hope was thin, but it had not yet died. That night, as the colony slept in broken shelters, the raiders returned. Their ships roared through the skies, black shadows blotting out the stars. Beams of fire fell upon the ruins, burning what little remained. Families screamed as they ran for cover. Defenders tried to resist, but their weapons cracked and failed. One by one, they fell. Rahator stood on the command balcony, watching the destruction. His people were being slaughtered. His city was turning to ash. He clenched his fists, anger mixing with despair. For a moment, he thought of ending the signal. Why keep calling for help when no one would ever come? But then, he remembered the children hiding in the ruins, the last innocent lives of his world. For them, he kept the beacon burning. Far above the burning planet, the distress signal pulsed again into the void. Weak, broken, but still alive. "We are dying. Help us, anyone." And somewhere, in the cold darkness of space, ears that were not meant to hear had already received it. Deep in a corner of the galaxy, far away from the shining worlds of the Council, there was silence. Humanity had been quiet for centuries. No one knew where they had gone. Some said they were destroyed in wars. Others whispered they had turned on each other and vanished. Most believed they were only legends now, stories told to frighten the young. But in the shadows, humans had not died. They had waited. They had watched. On a frozen world hidden behind thick storms, an old listening array sat buried in ice. For decades, it had been forgotten, a relic of another age. Its dishes were broken, its power weak. But when the alien distress call crossed its path, something stirred inside the ancient machine. Rusted lights flickered, and the signal was caught. A computer deep below the ice reactivated, searching, translating, processing. Slowly, painfully, it rebuilt the broken words. A voice played through the speakers, faint but clear. "We are dying. Help us, anyone." Alarms rang across the facility. Buried tunnels lit up as generators roared back to life. Human soldiers rushed through the halls, pulling on their uniforms. Engineers dusted off consoles that had not been touched in years. The distress call echoed through every corridor. Men and women froze as they heard it, and a strange silence filled the air. For a long time, no one spoke. Then one soldier whispered, "It's real." Deep underground, in a command chamber, Admiral Cole stood before a massive screen. His face was lined with age, his uniform worn from years of service, but his eyes were sharp. He listened to the call again, and his jaw tightened. Around him, officers waited nervously. "Sir," one of them said, "it could be a trap. We don't know who sent it. We don't know what waits for us there." Admiral Cole's voice was calm but heavy. "It doesn't matter. Someone asked for help. And humanity does not ignore a cry for help." The room fell silent. Every officer knew what his words meant. If they answered, they would reveal themselves to the galaxy. The secrecy humanity had kept for centuries would be gone. The galaxy would know the Deathworlders were alive. And once that happened, nothing could ever return to silence again. Still, no one argued. Orders spread quickly. Across hidden worlds and stations, fleets were awakened. Massive warships that had been sleeping for decades powered on, their engines shaking the ground. Hangar bays opened, revealing rows of sleek fighters waiting for launch. Soldiers armed themselves in silent determination. No music, no cheering, only the sound of steel and fire being prepared. In one hangar, a young pilot named Mara watched as her fighter was fueled. She had grown up hearing stories about the galaxy, about the betrayal that had forced humanity into hiding. She had never seen another alien in her life. Now, she was being sent to fight for them. A mechanic joked, "Funny, isn't it? They begged for us to stay gone. Now they beg for us to return." Mara only nodded, her hands tight around her helmet. On another world, an engineer activated a railgun battery. The weapon was so powerful that even its test shot shook the mountains. "Still works," the engineer muttered with a grim smile. "Let's see how the galaxy likes our answer." Meanwhile, Admiral Cole sent his final order. "The fleet moves at dawn. We will answer the call. Not as ghosts. Not as legends. But as Deathworlders." In the blackness of space, one by one, colossal ships rose from hidden docks. Their hulls were scarred from old wars, but their weapons gleamed with deadly power. Carriers, cruisers, destroyers, all gathered together, forming a fleet that had not been seen for centuries. Lights flickered across their bridges, engines roared to life, and the darkness of space burned with human fire once more. The distress call played again. "We are dying. Help us, anyone." And for the first time in centuries, humanity answered that I end the silence of deep space. Humanity's answer began to take shape. The hidden shipyards that had slept for centuries were alive again. Vast steel doors opened in slow motion, releasing the shapes of giants. Warships, silent and dark for generations, powered on one by one. Their engines glowed like stars, casting light across the void. Inside the flagship, Admiral Cole stood at the center of the command bridge. The deck vibrated beneath his boots as reactors came to life. Screens lit up around him, displaying long lists of systems. Weapons armed, shields online, drives ready. Officers moved quickly at their stations, their faces pale with the weight of what was happening. This was not just another mission. This was history. A voice crackled over the comms. "Flagship confirmed. All ships reporting ready status. Fleet is awakening." Cole gave a single nod. His eyes scanned the tactical display where hundreds of ships appeared as glowing symbols. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, even dreadnoughts. Humanity's strength, long hidden, now gathered like a storm. In the hangars, fighter pilots prepared their crafts. Mechanics rushed between rows of machines, sealing panels, fueling tanks, locking weapons into place. Pilots stood in silence, helmets in their hands, listening to the ground shake as capital ships powered their massive engines. For many of them, this would be their first mission beyond human territory. One pilot whispered to another, "Do you think the stories about aliens are true?" The other pilot only smiled grimly. "We'll find out soon enough." On the lower decks, soldiers loaded weapons into racks. Rail rifles clicked into place, their barrels glowing faintly with coiled energy. Armor suits were sealed, boots locked, helmets tested. The soldiers moved with discipline, but their eyes betrayed nervous excitement. They had been trained for this moment their entire lives, raised on legends of a galaxy that feared their kind. Now, they would see it with their own eyes. Across the fleet, crews watched as their ships left the safety of dockyards and entered the open black. For centuries, humans had been ghosts, unseen and unheard. Now they were stepping into the light again. But this time, they were not explorers, not wanderers. They were warriors answering a call. Admiral Cole stood in silence, his hands clasped behind his back, as the fleet moved into formation. His officers waited for him to speak, but he said nothing at first. He watched the display as ships aligned in perfect rows, a wall of firepower unmatched in living memory. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm and steady. Set course for the signal. Engage engines. Engines roared to life. One by one, ships activated their faster-than-light drives. Space rippled as the first wave vanished into the dark, followed by the next and the next. The fleet was moving, unstoppable and silent, like a storm rolling across the stars. On the council worlds, the skies were calm. Citizens lived their lives unaware of what was coming. The council members congratulated themselves, believing they had contained the danger by burying the distress call. They had no idea the Deathwelders had already heard, and were already on the move. Back on the colony that had sent the cry, the people still waited. Their fires burned low, their supplies were gone, and their hope was fading. Children asked if anyone would come. Elders shook their heads in sorrow. But in the skies above them, something was coming. Something powerful. Something terrifying. The fleet of Deathwelders was awake, and the galaxy would soon remember their name. The alien colony that had sent the distress signal was dying slowly. Their skies were covered in ash from burning forests. Crops failed, water supplies ran dry, and sickness spread through their camps. Every night, they looked up at the stars, hoping to see ships that would save them. Every night, the sky remained empty. Elder Theron, one of the colony's leaders, stood at the edge of the settlement. His scales were dull with age, his breathing heavy. Around him, children coughed and clung to their mothers. Families sat in silence, sharing what little food remained. The people whispered, "Did anyone hear us? Did anyone receive our call?" Theron closed his eyes. He wanted to believe. He wanted to give them hope. But no council fleet had come. The colony's warriors patrolled the edges, though their weapons were old and rusted. They were not soldiers anymore, only survivors. Their duty was not to fight but to buy time if raiders arrived. Everyone knew they would not stand a chance if an enemy came. That was why the SOS had been sent. One desperate cry to the stars, one last attempt before surrender. At the Central Command shelter, a small group of officers argued. "We should not have sent the message," one of them hissed. "If the Deathwelders hear it, we are doomed. Better to die forgotten than draw their eyes." Another officer slammed his fist on the table. "Better to die fighting than starving in silence. If they come, maybe they will save us, maybe they will destroy us. At least it will end this misery." The debate carried through the night, while the people huddled in their shelters, too weak to speak of hope. The distress beacon continued its slow pulse into the void, repeating the same broken words. "We are dying, help us, anyone." And then, one evening, a young child pointed to the sky. "Look," she whispered, her voice trembling. The others followed her gaze. A star, brighter than the rest, was moving. Then another. And another. Dozens of lights began to appear, faint but growing. The people gasped. Some cried out in joy, believing it was the council finally answering their call. Others fell to their knees, overcome with relief. Elder Theron's heart pounded. He turned his old eyes to the heavens. Yes, ships were coming. They were forming in the night sky like a fleet of burning suns. He almost laughed through his tears. "At last," he said, his voice shaking. "We are saved." But far above the dying world, within those ships, no council banners were raised. No familiar voices spoke across the comms. What came through the clouds were vessels unlike anything the colonists had ever seen. Black steel, sharp and powerful, engines burning brighter than stars. Their size dwarfed anything in the council fleets. The first of the massive ships pierced the atmosphere, its shadow stretching across the settlement. The ground shook as the engines roared. Dust rose into the air. The colonists shielded their eyes, staring up in awe and terror. Children cheered. Parents wept. But the warriors froze in silence. They saw the shape, the design, the markings. Their scales turned pale. Their voices trembled. One of them whispered the word the galaxy had long feared. Death Welders. The colonists had begged for rescue. Now rescue had come. But with it came firepower unlike anything they could imagine. The ground shook as the Death Welder flagship descended through the clouds. Dust storms whipped across the settlement, and the colonists clung to each other in fear. The roar of engines was like thunder, echoing across the barren valleys. When the ship finally landed, the earth itself seemed to groan under its weight. The colonists gathered at the edge of their camp, staring in silence. They had imagined council ships, sleek, elegant, painted with bright banners. What stood before them was different. The Death Welder vessel was sharp, armored, built for war. Its hull bore scars from battles long past, black steel lined with glowing red lights. To the colonists, it looked alive, like a predator crouched and waiting. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a section of the ship opened. A ramp extended with a heavy metallic groan. Mist hissed into the air as figures emerged. The first Death Welder appeared, tall and broad, wrapped in dark armor that gleamed under the fading light. His helmet reflected the terrified faces of the colonists. Step by step, more followed, their boots striking the metal ramp with perfect rhythm. Dozens of them, moving as one. Soldiers. Warriors. The colonists froze. Mothers pulled their children close. The warriors of the settlement raised their old rifles, their hands shaking. Elder Theron stepped forward, leaning on his staff. His voice was weak but steady. "Please," he called out, "we are not your enemy. We are only survivors. We sent for help." The lead Death Welder stopped at the bottom of the ramp. His visor flickered, and then his helmet folded back, revealing his face. His skin was pale, his eyes sharp, his expression unreadable. He studied the aliens in silence, as if weighing their worth. Then, in a voice that carried across the settlement, he spoke. "You called for aid. We heard." Gasps spread through the crowd. The language was strange, heavy, but somehow they understood. The Death Welders had learned their tongue, or perhaps remembered it from long ago. One of the alien officers stepped forward, trembling. We are starving. Our crops are gone. Our children are dying. Will you help us?" His words cracked with desperation. The Death Welder did not answer immediately. Instead, he lifted his arm. A signal. Behind him, more soldiers descended, carrying sealed containers. They placed them on the ground and opened them. Inside were supplies, food, water, medicine. The colonists gasped again, this time with relief. Some wept openly, rushing forward to touch the containers, to believe it was real. But the warriors of the colony did not lower their weapons. They had heard the stories. The Death Welders never gave without reason. Aid always came with a price. Elder Theron, his voice shaking, asked the question everyone feared. Why would you help us?" The Death Welder's gaze lingered on him. For a moment, silence stretched like a blade across the camp. Then he answered, "Because your cry reached us. And because the galaxy must be reminded, we still live." The words spread through the colonists like fire. Some felt hope. Others felt dread. They had asked for rescue, and they had been given it. But at what cost? If the Death Welders were truly back, the galaxy itself would tremble. Above them, the rest of the fleet hung in orbit like a wall of steel. Silent. Watching. Waiting. The colonists were alive. But they could not shake the feeling that they had awakened something far greater, something the galaxy had tried to bury. The Death Welders had answered the call. And now, nothing would ever be the same again. The settlement was silent except for the hum of the massive Death Welder ships above. Supplies had been given, water flowed again, food was distributed, and medicine eased the pain of the sick. For the first time in many cycles, the colonists could breathe without the weight of starvation pressing on them. Children laughed weakly as they tasted real food. Mothers cried with joy, clutching their babies as medicine healed fevers that had nearly claimed them. But even in that joy, unease spread like smoke. The Deathwelders did not leave. Their ships circled in the skies like predators, and their soldiers remained on the ground, watching every corner of the colony. They gave freely, but they did not smile. They stood in silence, armored and cold, their eyes sharp and unblinking. Elder Theron felt the unease more than anyone. He had lived long enough to know that no power in the galaxy gave without reason. The Council demanded taxes, raiders demanded plunder, mercenaries demanded pay. What would Deathwelders demand? The answer came sooner than expected. At the heart of the settlement, in the shadow of the flagship, Admiral Cole himself arrived. His presence made the air heavy. He wore no helmet now, his scarred face fully visible, his gaze like iron. Soldiers followed him in perfect formation, their steps echoing like thunder against the cracked earth. The colonists gathered in fear. Some whispered prayers. Others tried to hide their children. Elder Theron stepped forward, his hands trembling on his staff, but his voice steady. Great warrior of Deathworld, you saved us. For this, we are forever grateful. But we ask, what is the price? Admiral Cole studied him for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice calm and steady. The price is simple. Loyalty. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cole continued. You called for help. We came. But understand this, your signal did not only reach us. Others heard. Others are coming. Raiders, slavers, scavengers. You will not survive without protection. We will protect you. In return, you will serve under our banner. Your people will work with us. Your colony will become part of the Deathwelder domain. The words were like a blade cutting through the colony. Some of the colonists dropped to their knees in relief. Yes, they cried. Anything. We will serve. Just keep us alive. But others recoiled in fear, whispering that they had traded one master for another. The alien officer from earlier stepped forward, anger flashing in his eyes. You call this rescue? This is conquest. In a blur of motion, one of the Deathwelder soldiers moved. His rifle lifted, glowing with coiled energy. The alien officer froze as the barrel stopped just inches from his chest. Silence fell. The officer's voice broke, trembling now. You would kill us. Admiral Cole's eyes never wavered. We do not kill the weak who cry for help, but we do not tolerate rebellion. Make your choice. Elder Theron's heart ached as he looked at his people. He saw the sick children eating their first meal in days. He saw the mothers weeping with joy. He saw the faces of those who wanted to fight, and those who wanted to kneel. He knew the truth. Without the Deathwelders, they were already dead. With them, they might live, but under a shadow they could never escape. Slowly, with shaking hands, he raised his staff high. We will serve, he whispered. We have no other choice. Admiral Cole nodded once. His soldiers lowered their weapons. Then your colony lives. You are Deathwelders now. Above, the fleet adjusted position. The flagship's engines roared, casting firelight across the camp. The message was clear. The colony had been claimed. The people cheered and wept, half in joy, half in despair. They had been saved. They had been conquered. Both truths were one and the same. And far beyond the colony, across the galaxy, whispers would soon spread. The Deathwelders had returned. Not as ghosts. Not as myths. But as rulers.